It's a huge honour to speak to you. To begin with, I mean, you've become this icon of young people who are struggling, not just in Hong Kong, but across the world for social justice and for a just planet. But for those who haven't heard of you yet, do you want to just explain, introduce who you are to them?
I'm Joshua Wong, activist from Hong Kong, fight for democracy and freedom against the authoritarian rule of Beijing since the age of 15. Have the experience to lead the umbrella movement and also being jailed by the Communist Party. But that's my duty and responsibility. Hope to let my hometown have a brighter future. And that's the reason for me to be the activist.
Your book, Unfree Speech, can you explain why have you called it that? Tell us a little bit about the book and what drove you to write it and what the title means.
Unfree Speech is the book I wrote that hope to encourage more young generation realize that instead of wait until graduate from school or enter the government, we can make change when we are still a student. For the subtitle of the book, it emphasized the urgent manifesto of the threat to global democracy. With the rising of the second largest superpower, I mean China, that's the time for the world to realize that never kowtow to China to be the Beijing loyalist. I think that's my reason to share my journey to engage in street activism and youth activism and hope to fight for freedom, democracy, those universal values that we believe in.
Now, you're 23 years old now, but your struggle really began when you were only 14 years old. So can you just explain what prompted you, when you walked out of school in protest, what prompted you to do that at that moment?
The twisting point for me engaged in street activism is Beijing and Hong Kong government introduced the national education school curriculum that forced every student in Hong Kong not only love the country, but even loyal to the communist regime. As the stakeholders, I believe that's the time for us to organize a student movement, let our voice being heard not only in Hong Kong, but also in Beijing. And with how we have more than 100,000 people surrounded the government headquarters, that's one of the victory that Hong Kongers achieved in 2012 when I was at the age of 15, and also the first social movement that I engaged in.
So, just on the curriculum, it said the regime was an advanced and selfless regime and argued that toxic bipartisan politics in the West led to the suffering of its people. So it was basically this idea for young people being told that democracy was a bad thing.
When the teaching material funded by the Hong Kong government emphasized that Communist Party of China is the selfless, united, and progressive authorities, which is really insane, and actions speak louder than words. Through our action, civil disobedience, Occupy action, will finally let Beijing to know that we need democracy. And even the generation born after the transfer of sovereignty, we never kowtow to China.
So when you started doing these sit-ins and protests, what was the atmosphere like? Was there a sense of fear, of determination amongst you and your fellow protesters?
I remember when the first time for us engaged in street activism, people in Hong Kong didn't really pay a lot of attention, and they have a lot of doubt and really curious, how come high school students will organize protests or rally? In the previous day, politics it seems to be the things that just belongs to the baby boomers, to those lawyer, elite, scholar, or etc. It's never related to young generation. Perhaps some of the university students will still be interested in politics, but never high school student can have a say in the public sphere. But I think that's the reason for us have the uniqueness and also encourage those upper class elites realize that they need to listen to our voice.
Now, the main part of the book is about letters you wrote. Well, they are letters you wrote whilst you were imprisoned. Now, you've been arrested repeatedly by the authorities and imprisoned twice, as far as I know, for your activism. Tell us about your experience. Being imprisoned so young twice now for fighting for democracy and for human rights. Tell us about the experience of being in prison and what you took from the experience.
I was at the age of 20 when the first time Hong Kong government and Beijing locked me in prison. It's a difficult time for me, especially just keep me distant out from the society. Without the chance access to digital device or internet, and how young prisoners below 21 years old need to march every day, and with those unreasonable arrangements, it's not the easy time for me, but at least I overcome it. And compared to lots of my peers and friends being locked up in prison for 5 or 7 years, the price I pay is really small.
Your political party, and forgive me, I might not pronounce it properly. Is it Domicito?
Demosisto, yeah, you pronounce well, yeah.
Domicito, well. Tell us about what does that political party stand for? What is, democracy, obviously, but tell us about its ideology, what it believes in.
Demosisto is the political party we found after the Umbrella Movement. It led by several Umbrella Movement leaders, and Demosisto means democracy with resistance. Lots of the old generation always assume democracy comes with compromise, negotiation, dialogue, or kind of underground deal. But from the perspective of young generation, democracy comes from our resistance and how we resist and never step backward under the hardline suppression of Beijing. And with the spirit of the Umbrella Movement, how we sent out candidates to run for office and even have the youngest ever lawmaker in Asia at the age of 23. We hope to let people around the world to know that it's time to recognize the influence of Gen X or even millennials.
So it's fair to say then that in Hong Kong, like so many other societies, there's a big generational divide. I mean, why do you think that is? Why do you think younger people in Hong Kong have such a different attitude to older people in terms of what comes next for Hong Kong's politics, in terms of struggle against the Beijing regime?
Generation gap or generation divide are those two key terms that always we emphasize in the previous day, especially during the Umbrella Movement. But in the past half year, with the solidarity and unity of Hong Kong people, we get more than 85% of the seats in the district council election in last November, when 85% of the seats won by pro-democratic camp in Hong Kong, such a city with almost lowest birth rate around the world. We just proved that not only Gen X or millennials, even baby boomers, some of them turn from the pro-Beijing camp to pro-democracy camp, and that's why we gained a louder voice and stand as one.
Do you think the Beijing authorities are fearful that if you succeed in Hong Kong, then that would have a domino effect, that other people in the People's Republic of China would see that and they would feel encouraged themselves to take a stand? Do you think that's one of their fears?
In the most optimistic perspective, of course, we hope first is Hong Kong and the next is China. I hope one day not only Hong Kong, but also people in mainland China can enjoy democracy. But with the Great Firewall, political censorship, how free flow of information never exists in mainland China, I think it already explained and declared the difficulties and the threats that we face. But it also let people aware of the uniqueness of Hong Kong. Hong Kong is the only city under the direct rule and hardline rule of Beijing that still have certain degree of autonomy and free flow of information. And Hong Kong is stand in the forefront to confront the authoritarian value of Beijing.
It's 31 years since the Tiananmen Square massacre, when people protesting for democracy were massacred by the Chinese state. I mean, do you not have fears in Hong Kong that that level, even though you've suffered repression already, but that there could be far worse violent repression if eventually the Chinese authorities think we need to just crush these movements altogether?
In 2019, more than 2 million people took to the street in Hong Kong, such a city with only 7 million population. When 1/4 of Hong Kongers took to the street, it just results in the chilling effect generated by the Communist Party. No matter how they move the troops to the border in Shenzhen, or how those armed police have the military training to suppress on protests in mainland China. It also emphasized those evidence on how Beijing continue with its hardline approach to Hong Kong. But political crisis should solve by political system reform. Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989 should never happen in Hong Kong, such a modern and well-developed city. I think that's the reason why the world would care a lot on Hong Kong. No matter the G7 or G20 summits in 2019, lots of world leaders also show their concern to the failure of one country, two systems in Hong Kong and how Hong Kong is under the threat of Beijing.
In terms of, obviously, that threat of repression, what triggered this latest wave of resistance, which obviously it's a very courageous act? What was it that really triggered this new wave?
In 2014, during the Umbrella Movement, it's still the second year for Xi Jinping took over the power to rule Hong Kong and China. People still have a bit hesitation or considering should they really judge Xi Jinping are the one believe in authoritarian rule. But in the past 6 years experience, no matter activists being locked up in prison, book publisher being kidnapped to mainland China, foreign correspondent being expelled out from Hong Kong, and how lawmaker being unseated, even they were democratically elected. I think with those scenarios happening in the past 6 years, it just results in the resist of Hong Kongers who have no trust on President Xi Jinping, especially after the constitutional amendment. How long will still Xi Jinping be the president? That's the question I believe lots of world leaders are considering. One day it's still Xi Jinping who will rule China and Hong Kong. I see no chance for Hong Kong to enjoy democracy. So now the question is, how long will Xi Jinping still be the president? And how long will still Communist Party of China exist in the upcoming future?
Ai Weiwei has said that you represent a new generation of rebel. How much affinity do you feel towards other social and student movements all over the world? How kind of interconnected do you feel with a wave? Because we've seen a whole wave of youth movements elsewhere as well. Do you feel that bond? Is there any concrete links?
Youth activism around the world always remind the one work inside the institution. No matter they belong to the administration or the Congress, always they should respect and recognize the power from people and power to the people. And if they just ignore people's voice and enjoying those negotiation or trade deal in the political circle, it will just result in lack of trust, and people will organize and put pressure outside of the institution. No matter Black Lives Matter or the environmental justice issue raised by Greta, and how Malala in the previous day showed the concern about women's rights and etc. I think those issues also imply if those work inside the institution, there's lack of sensitivity and lack of incentive to make change, reform, and certain social movement will happen in countries around the world.
Part 3 of your book is a manifesto to counter the threat to global democracy. Why is what's happening in Hong Kong so relevant to people beyond who passionately believe in democracy no matter what the circumstances of their country?
Hong Kong is the battlefield of autocracy versus democracy, liberal value versus authoritarian rule. When China became the uprising second largest superpower that do not respect on liberal value or international order and continue to expand its sharp power to threatening and eroding the universal value that we believe in. I think the case in Hong Kong should, under the global spotlight, be more significant and remarkable, and let the world to know that even it seems to have the retreat of democracy in the past 1 decade, or even some of the think tank expert or scholar might doubt, is democracy really justified enough, suitable for people who live in Asia, or democracy or universal suffrage might just be the things belongs to the Western world. I think the case in Hong Kong or in Taiwan also prove that Chinese people, Chinese society, people in Asia deserve to enjoy their vote, to vote in the election, make change inside the institution.
Is one of the problems you face, and this is often the problem with struggle, that there are those who might feel dissatisfied with the way things are, but they feel also resigned. They feel that struggle against such monumental injustice is impossible. They feel defeated. They feel there is no alternative. You know, they feel too powerless as individuals to confront such huge injustice. Is that one of the challenges?
If you ask what's the biggest or largest challenge when I engage in street activism, people always assume I will provide the answer is CCP, the Communist Party of China. But I would say the most difficult issue or challenge that I face is how to overcome the downheart or depressed moment for our team. I just remember after the end of Umbrella Movement, we occupied on street for 79 days, but the political system remained unchanged. Lots of Hong Kongers feel downheart or depressed. I would say that the largest issue that we might need to overcome is not the Communist Party, it's the fear inside our heart. So how to overcome the fear and continue in such uphill battle, I think that's the lesson I took and also the lesson that I learned in the previous 8-year journey since the age of 15.
Do you think, I mean, there's people like yourself, like Greta Thunberg, these movements, you know, for example, in the US, led by young people for gun control. Do you think it will be your generation, finally, who'll, well, I mean, save the planet almost from everything from environmental injustice to authoritarianism? Do you think it will be finally this generation which will do what previous generations have so far failed to do?
We hope every new generation can make the progress far more than the past generation. Practically speaking, I'm not the one belongs to the millennials. I born in 1996.
Yeah, I know,
but, yeah. But I really hope more and more youngsters can come out to take action and make change to let our planet, our world, be a better place.